Totally.
they're they're not going to have the permission to have that hard conversation. So, that was the other piece maybe that's worth talking about here. I remind the guys that you've actually got the permission already to have the hard conversations that your competitors may not have, because you grounded your conversation in evidence in the beginning.
Welcome to Leading and Growing Your Real Estate Business. I'm James Short, and this show dives into the real stories behind the agents and the leaders shaping our industry. No polished highlight reels, just honest conversations about what's working, what's not, and how they're building businesses that actually grow. Each episode, I sit down with someone in the trenches, top performers, rising leaders, business owners who've cracked the code and others still figuring it out. We unpack the wins, the failures, the habits, and the lessons you can put to work straight away. Before we dive in, can I ask a favor, and please subscribe or follow on the platform you're listening or watching this. The more we grow, the bigger impact we can have together. And thank you. Let's get started. Due to popular demand, he is back in the hot seat. Jonathan Marlow from Exceed Real Estate, COO in Perth, WA. Co-founded Exceed back in 2016. His last time he was back on, we talked about building a business that doesn't depend on you. A lot has happened since then. We just quickly chatted around what's happening in the WA market. It is lots happening. So looking forward to unpacking that. So let's get him on. We're going to talk about a couple of different areas today. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk about mindset. And one of the things we're going to jump straight into is about helping teams managing expectation. Jonathan, honor and a privilege to have you back on the show, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a great intro. Thank you. Probably bigger than I deserve, but that's all right.
No. Gosh, I could be going on for ages. Mate, really appreciate it. I want to go straight into leadership, because we're talking about helping teams managing expectations, obviously with vendors and buyers and everything like that. And as you said, there's movement in the WA market. Would you like to unpack that in relations to helping teams, particularly in your leadership role, of helping them through this transition in market? Because I think it's across the board. Obviously, every state within Australia and even the US, they're going through a transition, obviously with what's going on overseas and everything in between. But it's how do we manage it and how do we lead our teams through that? So can you unpack that example in your words, but then how do you do that on a day-to-day aspect of leading and managing your teams?
So I suppose the important thing is that, the sales reps, when we're in that space selling, we are very much subject to the influence of the seller. And we're going to get carried on that journey. And we don't want to see things might be changing. So the denial sits with us as much as it does with the owner, right?
It's a long river, that denial.
Yeah, 100%. And so when we're having a conversation with the team, for me, one of the things is giving them permission to consider it might have changed, through having some confidence around that piece and drawing their attention to some of the data we're seeing and why that data suggests that it might be changing, why the data that might be coming out of CoreLogic, for example, might actually be a little bit out of touch with current circumstances, and giving them permission to kind of, or the freedom and confidence to explore that and not feel that that if they do make that call, that they'll be making the wrong call with their client, right? And again, look, we could get it wrong. So, I'm always mindful of that. So I'm very reluctant to have that conversation with my team until I kind of feel a fair degree of confidence in myself that what I'm seeing is there. But it's very, very much about giving them that confidence. And one of the pieces we talk about, for instance, is the data that's let's say coming out of CoreLogic, which says last 3 months was a 7.5% rise. There was in the last month a 2.2% rise, and so that's March data. So you could be forgiven for assuming that that's where it is. what I talked to the team about is the sentiment that was present when those outcomes that are recorded at March end, i.e. settlement, right? Those outcomes were negotiated where there was a different sentiment in the market, possibly 6, 8, 12 weeks before.
True.
Right. And it's having that conversation about, well, what were the circumstances present then? And, we didn't have interest rate rises. We didn't have the war. We didn't have the fuel prices going up through the roof because of the war. We didn't have the threat of another 3 interest rate rises this year, right? So a lot of those things are, definitely weighing on buyers' minds and causing buyers to show up very differently. So, it's then, okay, so that was the sentiment that created those outcomes, but that sentiment is old. So what is the sentiment we're seeing on the ground now? And then, it's helping them with, finding data that supports what we're seeing today. Now, the tough thing is there's no real central registry for buyer sentiment, right? So it's then, okay, so what are we seeing? Where can we get something that points in that direction? We look at our REWA data, and REWA was showing, the 4th or 5th consecutive week, actually probably, no, it's probably about the 8th consecutive week of climbing in stock levels. Actually, no, it's probably about the 10th. And the stock levels are climbing at a greater rate than what they're going out the door.
Yep.
Right. So that suggests that supply is starting to exceed demand. Yep. Right. And if that's the case, and that's been consistently now, which is, the same pattern we saw in middle to late 24. And, there was interest rate rises then. And then, really the only thing that caused that market to shift was interest rate reductions. So if we see some interest rate reductions on the horizon, then maybe we could say, okay, there's a different conversation to be had. Yep. But we're not seeing that. And I suspect that, from what we're hearing in the media, the other thing is the federal government's position on CGT, negative gearing. So, all of that stuff is probably suggestive that, there's going to be different sentiment and a different confidence that the buyer's going to bring to the table. And it's just sharing that data with them and really giving confidence to say, okay, maybe it's not a bad thing to have that conversation with my clients.
There's so many nuggets in there that I just want to unpack and just relay that. What I picked up was, first, obviously, you being aware of the data and you feeling confident in that data to then allowing your team to ask them how they feel and giving them the permission, and then working through that data with them so then they have the confidence in those conversations. And I think that for me is the testament of leadership. One, it starts with you, the leader, and then 2, having that, what are we referring these conversations often from? And it is the data points, it is the sentiment, it is the conversations that's been having. And 3 is then allowing them to step into that confidence, whatever that is, and however they display that confidence based from your leadership, based from the data, and based from where they're at. So I love that staggered approach of how you actually tackle that, rather than, because what I see is business owners, business leaders going, right, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, blah, 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 and it's a lot of tell. But what I'm hearing, you do a lot of questioning, you do a lot of asking, taking them more on that journey rather than just saying this is how it is. Would that be a fair summary version?
Yeah, I think having said that, when you just said that about the tell piece, I think there is a bit of tell, which I probably, to be honest, when you said that, I thought, what, maybe even I need to improve how I deliver that even more, right? So I do think there's a sense there that I'm telling, but yeah, I want them to question it, and I want them to not just go in at face value. So in other words, go in when you're looking at all the information. I want to encourage them to look at it from a point of view of discovery, not a point of view of confirmation.
Love it.
Right. So,
big difference.
100%. Right. And that's the big focus always with us.
Yep. Yeah. Fantastic.
So helping them find autonomy in those decisions. Yeah.
So true. So true. Now, with that then leadership piece and the change in market, how does that affect culture within the office? Like, because you have obviously the more experienced agents and team members who've gone through multiple cycles and go, okay, this is where we're at in this cycle. You might have more new to this type of cycle, maybe freaking out, or maybe go, oh my God, the world's going to end. So how does that affect the culture piece? And what are some of the things that you do to instill that confidence and that culture that, this is just a cycle that we're moving through?
Thinking to a couple of conversations that I've had in this last month, and it's all about helping them recognize that this is, quite likely a very positive thing, not a negative, right?
Great.
And so helping them reframe it and, explaining why it's a positive thing. I mean, one of the things that we're pretty fortunate about with our team and, is that they've all bought into our method. And our method is around, education of the client. And so that's a big foundation of what we do. And we don't therefore tell people what they need to hear. We tell them what they want to hear, but we learn how to educate in such a way that that doesn't cost us the business, right?
Right.
So our method has always been grounded in that. And so it's for them, then I can say, look, this supports how we go about things.
Yeah.
Right. So this change in the market, for us, we will see very little impact. Right. There'll be others that will see an impact if they're certainly, not that philosophy. Like if they're in that philosophy of volume and just, listed at any price. Like, I was talking to one of my team the other day, and there's an agent that he competes with who just goes in, finds out what the owner wants and lists it, right? Which is, let's face it, that's a fair chunk of our industry, right?
Sure. And,
I know that a guy like that is going to get caught with his pants down, right? Yep. Over a period of time, right? Guy or girl. But yeah, they're going to get caught where all of a sudden the stock is not going to be walking out the door.
Totally.
And they're not going to have the permission to have that hard conversation. So, that was the other piece maybe that's worth talking about here. I remind the guys that you've actually got the permission already to have the hard conversations that your competitors may not have, because you grounded your conversation in evidence in the beginning and data. Right. So, you will be able to go back and have that conversation without feeling like you have to eat your words, or without feeling like you're going to get challenged on your integrity because of how you express things in the beginning.
And that's that real foundation piece. What I'm picking up is that education piece. So you're setting the framework, you're setting the foundation early, so you can come back if needed to have these courageous conversations and to look at, this is the reasons why and this is how.
Yeah.
What does that do to, that's a real important piece. What does that then do to the agent's confidence and then the team culture, knowing that they've had that education piece, the framework set up, the fundamentals working with their clients based from that underpinning thing of the education? What does that do to the team, the culture? I think it's a game changer.
Look, it definitely is important. It expresses itself in the conversations I'm having where they're saying, they're edifying or validating what we do awesome. In our conversations, right? They're saying, yeah, look, it's so good that we do things the way we do them, right? And so, you'll have someone new that sits in the room and he says, that our training is what's making the difference. And I'm saying, well, that might be part of it, but it's your execution that makes the difference. Like, I can train you till the cows come home, but I can't go in and execute for you, right? So, it's me, if anything, so the culture piece is I get feedback that they're sort of supporting what we're doing and they're saying, look, it's, we're so grateful that we have this. So for me, it almost, it gives me, a great deal of satisfaction that that's the way they feel. So then I'm almost getting embarrassed and going, I have to turn this back on you as you're the reason it's working, not what we're doing, right? Or not what we teach. And I think it is, like the reality is, I think that's an important distinction to be made, with them, because then it's, building that value in them.
Yeah, so true. Which then leads me to that third piece about building the value in them, which I think is closely related to mindset. And so if you think about education allows that inner confidence because they're being trained, they're being guided of what's happening and how it's happening. But how do you work and what's your philosophy and thoughts around helping someone through maybe on a challenging time with their maybe having some internal challenge on their mindset for those super performers to ensure that they stay at the top of their game? What are some of the strategies that you do to help the team to work through maybe out of the funk, getting out of those trenches, but also maintaining that rhythm and that flow? What are some of the things that you help with the team?
So when we're talking about what's going on for them, it'll be, I remember a great mentor of mine would say, you're either helping them get unstuck or you're helping them, develop the right habits, right? Or helping them with, a sales process, right? And so for me, first thing is in that one-to-one, I'm finding out where are they at in that piece, right? And then very quickly, depending on where they're at, will be what things I'm focusing on. But I very quickly try to turn the conversation back to habits and process, and get them to lean into that and get them to take their focus off the outcome end.
Love it.
Right. So it's kind of, okay, let's, how do you think that's affecting, that last meeting? What did you say? What did they say? And then I might pick up that there's a bit of anxiousness creeping in, or a bit of urgency creeping into their language, right? And that urgency isn't going to help that client feel supported and comforted. So I then, lean back into, don't feel anything about the data, right? So, like they'll say, oh, it's they might be using the language of, oh, things look, like there's been a significant shift in the market, or there's been a downturn in the market. Try to get out of those emotive descriptions and try to get out of how you feel about that emotively. Just look at the data and look at the process and what is the nature of the conversation you need to be having, and just try and execute that, and don't worry about the outcome. Right. Actually, a classic one I'm just thinking of now, and I don't know if I explained that as well as I would have liked, but I'm just thinking of, there was one of the team was about to go on holidays, and he went in and really shortcutted the presentation of this offer that he had, which is
Right.
likely the best offer that owner's going to see, right?
Yep.
And he wanted to get it done before he went on leave, right? Rather than leaving to one of the team to look after whilst he was away. And he therefore, kind of, his urgency showed up in that meeting,
Of
right?
course.
And so, there'll be he's away at the moment. So there'll be a conversation when he gets back, though, of, okay, look, let's look at why that went the way it did, right? Because that owner likely, by the way, is going to get in their own way if we don't kind of, shift that focus. So it's helping them kind of identify when they've shown up that way, and then help them kind of get reattached to a set of actions.
So true. And I love that awareness piece, that getting them to be aware of how they're turning up to those conversations, how their energy, how's their language, and then coming back to the habits piece, which is music to, well, touches all my amazing heartstrings right there, right? Because we are our habits, and taking ourselves off the outcome, and what habits are we working on? What habits do we need to be releasing? So that's absolutely gold. What's coming up for you? I mean, we're in end of April now. What's on the horizon over these next for the rest of the year, maybe the next 6 to 12 months? Any cool projects, any exciting things, any things that you're working on in particular?
Yeah, look, we're shifting slightly our recruitment strategy. And, partly because we've always been, just focused heavily on coaching and completely ignored any level of poaching, right?
Yep.
And, it's been it's really hard for me because I'm philosophically a little bit opposed to poaching, right? Because I've seen the damage it's done to our industry. So if I look on a macro level, I can see the problems with it. And as an industry-wide piece. But, we're having to shift that focus a little. So it's about finding those relationships. And again, not to stop the coaching piece, but to, find a greater level of financial support for bringing in those new recruits, right? So, we kind of had a couple of people, we had, 4 over the last year and a half that were significant performers that went and opened their own office. And, that kind of, we replaced, but with brand new people that takes, like these are guys that are, producing at the seasoned end of their career and they're like a 300, no, maybe like a 200 game AFL player or a 150 player, and I'm replacing them with a 5 game, right?
Yep.
So, I've got to kind of work through the teething pain of that, but then that doesn't give me the revenue to keep recruiting those people, right? So then, we're looking at, how we get a bit of a balance there. So that's this next 12 months is really sort of finding that right balance.
Correct.
And we've got some, plans around how we create a vehicle for the people that do want to open their own office to open it with us instead of opening it in competition to us, right? So, I suppose this is where every company, hits that space, right? And, we probably now can see why, there's an LJ Hooker, why there's a Harcourts, why there's a Ray White is, they probably reached this point along the journey. So that's kind of, those are the 2 main projects for the next 12 months that we want to, roll out in a good way. Probably the third one is we've got a slight change to our property management as a service model. So we're building that equity piece now for our team members where they can build their own rent rolls working with us.
Fantastic.
And so again, it's rolling that out on mass. So we've spent 7 or 8 years developing that piece, and getting the company ready to be able to deliver that. And now we're in that space where we can. And so so there's probably those 3 focuses now that will occupy all my.
There's some chunky projects. Very good.
Yeah, but they're all projects that have, to a degree, had a fair amount of work already. But there's it's fun. Like, I think, the destination.
It's exciting.
The destination is not the fun part. It's the journey, right? So, we're definitely not destination focused, and we're not, arriving at any end place. We're just, arriving at constant improvement places.
Love it. Fantastic. Now, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you think is important for us to discuss today?
Look, I think not. I think when you and I chat, it seems to, we're probably on such a similar wavelength that it seems to, like, everything comes out. Look, the only thing, maybe that I would suggest as an industry we need to find is, I think, a better way of giving our people balance, helping them find balance. So
talk to me about that. Yeah. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, there's our industry has you know, is littered with, you know, broke, like highly successful broke salespeople,
Yep.
right? They're at the end of their career and they're flat broke,
Yep.
right? And it's like, well, you know, how did that come about? Well, so there's one, there could have been a couple of healthy divorces in there, right?
True.
That has probably contributed to that. And, you know, two, it's the what contributes to those divorces? Well, it's that, you know, letting work consume you piece,
Got
right?
it.
So I think, you know, I'm as an industry, and actually, you know, when we talk about this now, that's probably also just always an underlying thing for me is how do I find a way to help my team not be in that space? Because, you know, it's very easy to also want to encourage the sales volumes and keep them there because that's helpful for all of us, right?
Yep.
But how do I kind of manage that where I give them longevity and where I help them become, you know, very wealthy people? Like we want to build millionaires, right?
Sure.
As well. So, you know,
Healthy ones.
yeah, that's right, 100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah, and
Right.
well, and this thing, right? So I feel like if you don't have that balance, you'll lose it in the divorce courts anyway.
So true.
So you've got to have this ongoing journey where you're balancing out that piece, and yeah, that's yeah, a big focus.
I think that's a really good point because
Paying our attention to.
yeah, that's a really good point because the ability to, and I see it day in, day out of, you know, agents going all in, working, you know, 14-hour days, 6 days a week, but yet they've got a growing family at home crying out for love and attention. Some get through it, some don't, and the rippling effect that it has on households and families and their own personal health is the mindset, it is very sad. So it's the ability to look at that and unpack that, and I think it's you definitely hit a great topic that needs to be explored in further rooms. That's for sure.
100%.
Yep. Fantastic. Jonathan, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for jumping on the show, and I look forward to getting you back on very, very shortly.
Thanks, James. It was a real pleasure.